I'm going to show you how to replace rear brake pads and rotors. This process is very similar for many makes and models. I have a 2008 Toyota 4Runner. One important thing to verify as to whether or not your vehicle has an electronic parking brake. If there's a button, you likely have an electronic parking brake. If it's a pedal or handle, you likely do not. This does not have an electronic parking brake, so we can take the wheel and caliper off with no problem. Before we get started, we want to make sure we chalk the front wheels, since we will be working on the rear axle. Before we jack up the vehicle, I want to make sure that the lugs are broken loose. This particular vehicle has mixed-matched lug nuts, so it's different sizes, 19 and 21. At this point, I'm just turning them one full turn so that they're loose. Again, make sure the front wheels are secure. Now we can fully jack up the rear axle. Put a jack stand under it. I'm going to leave the jack there as well, but the pressure is on the jack stand. And then I'm going to fully remove those lug nuts that we broke free. Once all the lugs have been removed, we can now take the tire off. There is the rotor. You can see the wearing towards the inside of the rotor. The first thing we need to do is remove these caliper bolts. There's two of them. You can see they're covered in dirt. And then the bracket bolts as well. All four of these bolts are 17 millimeter. I got my bungee cord. It's too long of a bungee cord, so I wrapped it around the frame a couple times to shorten it up. But I'm just going to break these loose. Again, 17 millimeter bolts. There's one caliper bolt. Put that off to the side and don't lose it. And the second caliper bolt. Now I'm going to use my screwdriver and just pry the caliper loose just a millimeter or two so I can take it off real easy. Now I'm going to use that bungee cord that I had prepared to hold the caliper hanging. And I do this so that there's no tension on the brake line and it's out of my way so I can continue working. If you have a shorter bungee, you won't need to wrap it around the frame like I did. I'm just making sure that the brake line has no tension on it. Now we can remove the brake pads from the old bracket. From the bracket, rather. And I can break these 17 millimeter bolts loose as well that hold the bracket to the knuckle. And once those are loosened up, I use my drill to speed them out. Here they are. They're a little bit shorter than the lug bolts, or rather the caliper bolts. So place those bracket bolts off to the side. Don't lose that washer. Now we can remove the bracket. Place that off to the side. We can remove the rotor since we're trashing this one. No need to be careful with it. You can see on the back side, there's some wear as well, but it was causing some real vibrations in the seat when the brake pedal was applied. If you felt vibrations in the steering wheel, it would be more likely that the front ones would need replacing. But here are some AutoZone brake parts, brake rotor, just putting that on. Now we can grab that bracket, replace the metal hardware clips. There's 4 individual clips that attach to this mounting bracket. I'm just cleaning it off from all the brake dust and rust that accumulated over time. There's the AutoZone brake pads, came with the new clips. We're just going to secure them in the same way that we took them off. They do go on a certain way. There's a certain amount for the left, certain amount for the right. Make sure you are putting those on the exact way you took them off. So just notice the differences between the sides and make sure they are fully seated on the bracket. Then we can slip the bracket over the rotor and install the bracket bolts. Make sure not to cross thread these, put them in slowly with your hand first, and then we can use our 17 millimeter to tighten them down. And once those are fully seated, we want to tighten them down to 77 foot-pounds of torque. That's for the rear bracket. So make sure those are torqued to spec or a little tighter. At this point, we're going to want to release the brake fluid cap because we're going to be pushing back the brake caliper in order to make room for the new thicker pads. I have the special brake caliper tool, which works great. If you don't have that, then you can take the old pad and some pretty big channel locks, and it works just the same. The real thing you need to do is apply even, smooth pressure and don't push it too far back in to where it gets stuck. Once that's pushed back in though, we can close the cap of the brake fluid reservoir and install the new brake pads. So since the metal clips have already been installed under the bracket, the new pads should slide right in. It can be a little difficult. You might have to use a thumb to hold a metal tab into place, but make sure those are seated correctly and fully installed. At this point, I use a product called AGS Sill Glide. The link will be in the video description, but I use this on the back of the brake pads, just a dab spread out, nice and thin. And I also use it on the brake caliper slide pins or the caliper bolts as well. So I'm gonna clean those off, get all that old lubricant off. I'm even gonna stick it back in and get any excess lubricant off I can, clean them off real nice, and then I'm gonna apply the AGS Sill Glide to it as well. I will link to that in the video description. This keeps your brake parts sliding freely as they should be and keeps everything quiet. So I'm gonna install those. The one thing to be careful when putting the caliper back on is to make sure that the rubber boots that keep those slide pins clean are not being damaged. So you can see me kind of fiddling with it. I'm making sure that those rubber bootings got fit just so in between the caliper and the bracket. So just be careful and make sure those go into place just like they were when you took them off and that they protect the slide pin. So they're all lubricated up and we can install those caliper bolts. Again, make sure they're done by hand first and you're not cross-threading anything. And once those are tightened down snug, then we can torque them up to spec. You want to be extra careful with these caliper bolts and not break them. The torque spec is 65 foot-pounds. You can go slightly over it, but keep it right in the neighborhood of 65 foot-pounds. You don't want to break those off. After those are torqued to spec, we can now clean off the caliper just using some brake clean. Grab that tire and wheel, and we can put it back on. Line up the lug nuts just right, slip it on, and now we can secure the lug nuts. I thread them on by hand first, making sure that they're not cross-threaded at all, and then I use my drill to speed things up. Whenever I tighten lug nuts, I always go in a star pattern. That is, when I tighten one, I tighten the one across from it next. Once those are on pretty secure, I lower the vehicle, not with all the weight on the ground, but enough to hold the tire, and I torque those down to spec as well. In this case, it's 83 foot-pounds, but when it comes to lug nuts, I'm willing to go a little bit over that. If you were ever in doubt, I always just put it at about 100 and call it good. Very important thing to do because we retracted the brake caliper. You need to pump the brake pedal many times before driving to make sure that it's been pushed out and makes contact with the rotor and can stop the vehicle correctly. So anytime you work on the brakes, make sure to pump the brakes before starting the vehicle. And since we did the rear axle, when we put it into reverse and we hit the brakes, a lot of braking force will be on the rears. So I'm gonna back up a little bit, apply the brakes, make sure they work. Then I'm gonna do it going a little bit faster on my neighborhood road. And then after I've done that a couple times, I'm gonna put it driving forward and increase my speed to about 15, 25, gradually hit the brakes, and then I'm gonna go on a main road and do it at 35, 45, 55 as long as it's safe. This will make sure that the brake pads have been seated correctly. So if you found this content helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions at all, please leave a comment. I'll do my best to get back to you. Please see the video description for any links.